Hello there, my name's Card. I'm a long-time progressive community organiser and activist, and here on my YouTube page I like to occasionally make simple videos about topics I'm interested in. Today, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how the protests in New Caledonia are quickly becoming the latest big international news story. But just to be clear, I'm not here to talk primarily about the protests themselves or why they're happening. I want to talk about the discourse and discussion and debate that is happening and will continue to happen about them. Just a tiny bit of context first, in case you didn't know. New Caledonia is an island nation in the Pacific Ocean. And when I say nation there, it's relevant to the conversation here to note that New Caledonia is legally unique among modern countries. It's an overseas territory of France, which is a holdover from the colonial era. And ever since the 1940s, the French have more or less let the locals run it slightly more independently than an outright client state, but a little less independently than a sovereign nation in its own right. All the while, there's been this long history of factional disputes on the island about how much independence New Caledonia ought to have, and who should decide what happens to the place's natural resources, and who can and can't be a citizen, and so on. Point is, there's lots of different interested parties that have been arguing over this place for decades. Most recently, in the last month or so, all this disagreement has spilled over into real open conflict. Not for the first time, but this is shaping up to be the biggest instance of it in quite a while. Lots of protests, demonstrations, riots, some violence, with reportedly a few fatalities. And there's not necessarily any quick solutions in sight. Here's the thing I wanted to talk more specifically about, though. As all this news filters through to the Western First World, a lot of people are going to start having opinions based on what they've read or been told. And that's fair enough. Everyone is allowed to have an opinion, of course. But, as a long-time progressive organiser, I just wanted to make mention of the fact that if you're anywhere with a sizable population, you're going to start seeing people, maybe local hippie-type groups, or anyone with a connection to your local lefty student scene, and they're going to start pushing this New Caledonia stuff real soon, if they haven't already started where you live. Now, that might just seem like it's whoever just being socially conscious about a topic that's in the news. But trust me, that's not just what it is. What you'll be seeing at practically any pro-New Caledonian independence demonstration in the West is some combination of scam, or reading group recruitment drive, or newspaper sales racket. There is a certain type of group that presents itself as a leftist org that typically tries to parasitize the time, effort, money of well-meaning but inexperienced people, like university students. So they'll just pop up out of nowhere with a new name every month, purporting to be supporters of the good guy side in whatever's making headlines. Experienced local community activists who spend years and years focusing on doing real boots-on-the-ground work for tangible issues like union drives and tenants' rights spot this shit from a mile away. It's always the same. Even if we set aside the fact that, for one thing, popular opinion among restless First Worlders sure as hell doesn't direct foreign policy and won't anytime soon, realistically, not 1 in 100 Westerners actually knows the first thing about New Caledonia or the unrest that's been building up over there for the last 70 years. Even here in Australia, where we're essentially their nearest major country and one of their biggest trading partners, the average person on the street here knows fuck all about New Caledonia. The group you run into making a nuisance of themselves outside City Hall in your American Midwest flyover college town sure as shit doesn't know this stuff. Frankly, if you're anywhere in the English-speaking world, you probably haven't heard of this stuff before. Why would you have? This goes doubly so for what you hear from media figures and online commentators. Whether it's someone with a byline in a respectable major newspaper's opinions page, or it's a YouTube politics debate bro streamer. But if you're into any sort of political opinion content, in the very near future, you're going to start hearing about New Caledonia. Quite possibly, from people who couldn't have readily found it on a map a fortnight ago. It just has to be said that no one, not even the most well-informed person on the face of the earth who you agree with 100%, could possibly be able to give you a perfect account of every single news situation in the world the week it happens. Just keep your head on your shoulders when you see people getting all up in arms about some big news item, whether online or otherwise. I'm sure that later this year we'll go through the same sort of thing again when the upcoming Iranian election happens, or when the conflicts in the Sudan and the Congo flare up again, or whenever there's a botched coup in South America, or China does another round of military exercises. There will always be a new thing that grifters will grift off of. All that said, I don't want to end this video on a pessimistic tone. All this doesn't mean there isn't a right way to care about what's happening in the world, or that genuinely good causes aren't worth supporting, and that includes good issues stemming from international conflicts. Take, for instance, the strident opposition virtually every leftist has to the most recent outbreak of the Israel-Palestine conflict. That's an area that left-wingers have been organising around for decades, and it's not like you need to suddenly come up with your own bespoke reason for demonstrating in favour of an end to the fighting over there. Especially not when that's something Westerners might actually feel some stake in or responsibility to speak out against, when most Western countries are actively funding and abetting the conflict in one way or another. Or even something like the latest Ukrainian conflict started up a couple years ago. You don't need to pretend to understand the intricacies of every single detail of why that war started and why it's still being fought to be able to say that wars of aggression and civilian casualties are typically bad. And it's not like the Russia-Ukraine thing came out of nowhere either. This is like at least the third time Russia's tried to annex part of Eastern Europe in the last couple of decades. The point is, when you get a situation that realistically no Westerner saw coming, like the New Caledonia thing right now, it's perfectly okay to want to understand the situation and want to look to people who seem like they know what they're talking about. But you need to keep your head on properly and remember that in times of sudden crisis, a lot of people whose jobs are to be political talking heads and people who want to fashion themselves as some sort of foreign policy expert will try and capitalize off of whatever's in the news cycle. So whenever you see someone online or in real life getting really loud about New Caledonia in the near future, or the next sudden thing, or the next unexpected thing after that, and so on, just exercise a little healthy skepticism. Political organising isn't, or shouldn't be, about latching on to every single new thing just for the sake of it. Anyone serious about pursuing a real independent political project should regard the people doing so as terminally unserious. And if you don't believe me, just wait to see how quick they drop the New Caledonia stuff for whatever the next thing is. They're wasting your time and their own. I hope that gives you something to keep in mind. Once again, my name's Card. If you might want to hear more from me, feel free to subscribe to this YouTube page, or just take a look at my other videos. Either way, goodbye for now, and have a lovely day.